Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. If you've never had investors before in your business or you've never raised capital, it could feel like this big black box of like, what am I supposed to do? And how am I supposed to communicate with them? And what are they expecting of me? And what are my responsibilities when it relates to these investors? And all of this is answerable. But if you're thinking of raising capital and you've already established that you're going to form a corporation, let's say, and you're going to take on shareholders, this is what I want you to keep in mind when it comes to communicating with investors. And this is something that can actually help you acquire more investors or even just create a better investor relationship so that you're less stressed out or less worried about what the investors are going to say if they have any sort of say in how your business is run or decisions that you make. So, a couple of things that I want to preface with this is you have a lot of control as the founder, as the person who is soliciting the capital. You have a lot of control over what you want this relationship to look like. Now, typically, companies will have some type of investor agreement that they will send out to those who want to invest that dictates the terms. It's kind of like a partnership, kind of like any other agreement saying, hey, this is what we're going to send you, or this is what we expect of you, or what you can expect of us. Generally, that's how every contract, every agreement works. It's an exchanging of expectations. So, an investor agreement is going to have different sections within it that you'll go through with a lot of pieces related to, the voting that the investor will have if they have any, what types of shares they get, if they get first pick in the event that there's an exit, how much they get, not how much literally in dollars, but what they're entitled to in terms of their share of value and their order of, looks like the pecking order. When you exit the business, in what order are people paid out? That's what I'm trying to say. But when it comes to the communication aspect, that's what I really want to focus on in today's episode and inform you. I have a couple of clients who are raising capital currently. And one of the things that we've talked about is, well, what are you doing to communicate to your investors? What are you doing to get them hyped up and get them excited about investing more money, investing again, or telling their friends to also invest? You know, although we can't really offer investment advice a lot of the times, what can we do to like get people excited about promoting your company and become a strategic investor and a strategic relationship for you where people are excited to talk about the fact that they're an investor in your company, that they want to brag about you guys. So, one thing that we've talked about is you want to follow this investor agreement and you want to make sure that you are communicating financial results in compliance with the investor agreement. My best advice here is to not overpromise what you're going to be able to provide them and to also not voluntarily offer a lot of information to the investors without them soliciting it or requesting it. Now, this is going to sound kind of weird because I'm usually an advocate for telling them everything, telling them the whole story. We have nothing to hide, nothing to be, shameful of. But here's the thing, when you create an expectation that you're going to communicate with your investors regularly. Let's say you sign yourself up for, hey, we're going to communicate with you every single month and we're going to give you a P&L and it's going to be awesome. We're going to tell you everything that's going on with the company. Oh my goodness. If I had to do that as a CFO, that would be a massive headache. I would double my fee because if I have to send a P&L out to these like 38 investors and then I have to intake a lot of questions, right? Especially from people who have like 5, 10, 15, 20, $50,000 invested and aren't like big wig investors. So these people are going to say, hey, like what's going on with this line item on the P&L or what's going on here? Like we don't need to get down to that level of the decimal point. We don't need to be answering those types of questions. We should be thinking strategically and big picture and long term. Because if you've laid out to your investors that this is a long term hold strategy for them, like, hey, we want to grow this thing for 3 to 5 years, then we want to exit, that's our plan, whatever that is, then we should be communicating in accordance with what that plan is and along these major milestones along the way. What I recommend doing instead of financial results on a super frequent basis is I recommend if they have some sort of tax impact to these financials that you report a little bit more in the form of maybe annually, semi annually, or quarterly. Now, you might want to do that just so people are aware that they may have a tax impact. If you have a partnership, let's say these people will have the income passed through to them and they may need to take distributions in order to pay their taxes. So, because this has a tax impact, you're going to want to communicate to them. But if there's no tax impact, like if you have a corporation and the taxes are paid at the corporate level, then your investors really are just hoping that your company increases in enterprise value and are not really impacted by taxes in a very direct way. So, they really shouldn't be knocking down your door with a bunch of questions on the financials. Now, are they concerned with the health of the business? Absolutely. But there are other ways other than divulging all of the information of the financials, which is also very risky, by the way, to share outside of your organization. Every time you email these financials or even transmit them, you're running the risk of somebody sharing them with other people, of it just getting out there. I would like to avoid sharing financials with anyone who doesn't absolutely need them for their core function or duty in the company. And it's not to hide anything, but it's to keep things secure. Hey, it's Shannon, and I wanted to remind you that the love language of podcasters is reviews. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of seconds just to leave us a review if you're enjoying this show, we would really, really appreciate it. Okay, back to the show. So, if you haven't promised financials to your investors, I wouldn't overpromise what you're going to be able to deliver for them. Instead, here's my suggestion. If you want to maintain solid communication with your investors, but you don't want to necessarily divulge all of your financial information on a regular basis, what I would do is have a newsletter style communication that goes out quarterly around the investment. What are the key things that you've accomplished? What are the key wins that you've celebrated? What are the key deals that you have secured? What are the steps forward toward your goal that you're taking? Who have you hired that you can brag about? Who have you partnered with that you can brag about? And how can you keep momentum by kind of, it's almost like a sales pitch in an email in a way, like email marketing. How can you essentially market to your investors that they made a good decision with their money, you're a good steward of their money, and they should either invest more, they should tell their friends to invest, etc. How can you create that buzz and that sense of pride in your investors that they're a part of this project with you? That's what your focus should be on, is how do I make them feel secure, informed, and confident without necessarily having to explain all these numbers and all these financials, signing yourself and possibly your CFO up for a ton of extra effort. And I'm not speaking just from that in a selfish way by saying, like, don't sign me up for this. But I've just been there where communication has been overpromised and, it creates a lot of distraction and it takes away from the core efforts that you're trying to do when people are pulling you back, trying to get you to answer questions about what happened in the past. It's just a distraction for you. So if you're trying to sit in that visionary role, it's going to be really important for you to focus on those strategic objectives, focus on looking forward, your budgets and projections. And, if you want to have a 5-year projection on hand to share with your investors, by all means, we can do that. But what you should do is keeping them focused on the windshield and not the rearview mirror. So we want to make sure, especially for startups, you're going to not be profitable for some time, and you don't want to mislead people, but you also don't want to overpromise the financial results and make people have expectations of higher performance. And then if you have a loss in your first couple of years, which you probably will because you're doing a lot of investing and investing in specific costs like, equipment or long-term things, and you're probably investing in maybe even franchising or licenses and things that take a lot of money up front. So if you're doing that as you're starting your business, then it's going to be really important for you to make that clear that you're probably not going to be profitable for a couple of years and that your outlook is a lot longer than that. You want to set realistic expectations while also being optimistic. And that's sometimes the game of tug of war that you have to navigate. But that's where a CFO comes in. A CFO can help you with the projections, helping you keep things realistic and yet confident, and being able to answer some of those questions that investors have as they're ready to contribute capital. A lot of the times that when an investor is super confident by putting their money in based on what they're reading, they're actually not going to follow up. They're not going to be communicating with you continuously. They're probably going to trust you that you're a good steward of their money because they've already made that decision to invest with you. And a lot of investors aren't actually super savvy about asking certain questions on the financials anyway. So typically, this is not an expectation that they have. They're not really expecting to review financials. So if you haven't been asked for these things, why provide them? It just creates more risk by sharing this outside your company, creates more questions and more possibilities of uncertainty. And it can actually dilute the confidence because if they're getting these financials, they don't know how to read them. A lot of people, when they see uncertain items or they're confused by something, they immediately go to a negative. They immediately go to, "Ooh, this might be bad news. I see negative numbers. What is this? What's going on?" And it just creates unnecessary stress. So, my recommendation is always, if you're going to be communicating with investors, we basically share the highlight reel, we share what's going on. By all means, you can share a few little hiccups if you want to, but why bother? Let's talk about what is moving you forward in a good high velocity, where your vision is going, what you need. For example, hey, investors, we're really excited about this new partnership. In case anyone has a relationship with XYZ person, we're actually looking at getting a meeting with this person soon. And who knows, maybe one of your investors has a first or second degree connection to that person or to that company. So, always making it clear what your next goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, but with always that tone of optimism and with the objective really clear of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to take this company. I think that will instill a lot of confidence and help you manage those expectations while being forthcoming with information, but also, not divulging anything that you don't need to. And not just because it's negative, but because it just invites a lot of conversation that doesn't have to happen at an early stage in a company, because we're going to overcome a lot of these obstacles. We're going to get through this together. And we want to celebrate the wins and just know that everything else is a small speed bump or a small hiccup along the way that doesn't need to create additional stress. So, profitability is one thing, but cash flow is what truly keeps your business running smoothly. It's not just about how much you make, it's about how much you can actually use to sustain and grow and maintain that cash in your control. When you book a power session with me, we can take a look at your payment cycles, your transaction timing, and your personal cash needs to make sure you're staying ahead of the curve. Managing cash flow is a constant process, but one of the most important pieces of the puzzle for a successful business. Find out more information about a power session with me to do your cash flow forecast in the show notes.